I am Amanda Ripley, a journalist, an author, and conflict mediator. And before starting Good Conflict, I also spent many, many years in journalism at Time Magazine and The Atlantic and other places before also deciding, like Ellen, that journalism didn't seem to be working the way it was supposed to. So I wrote a book called High Conflict about how people get into and out of intractable conflict. And that experience, following people who have been through that, transformed how I operate in the world as a journalist, but also just as a person. And it led me to want to share those lessons with more people, which is why we started Good Conflict 4 years ago. And one thing we've learned so far is that a lot of unhealthy conflict comes from fear, from mismanaged fear. When we feel afraid, we tend to make more mistakes. We miss opportunities. We literally lose our peripheral vision. We do things that unintentionally make our problems worse for ourselves and for the people that we love, which is, by the way, totally understandable.
Yeah.
We just aren't wired as humans to manage chronic anxiety and fear in a 24-hour news cycle, especially not in isolation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And it's really why we want to start by just acknowledging that all of you joining us today. I mean, because it is so much easier, and we've felt this ourselves, to just put our heads down at times and to avoid or ignore this discomfort and uncertainty and worry. But we all know that eventually that will take a toll on us, and it does so physically, mentally, and also spiritually. So just by showing up here today, you are looking this problem in the face, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And we know from decades of research that doing that in a forgiving space with other people makes difficult emotions just way less destructive, and maybe even a little bit useful. So, with that, we just want to thank you for being here with us and for tackling this with us.
We know everyone is coming here with really different challenges and experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of you are federal workers or contractors who are worried about their jobs and their futures. Some people are students afraid for the future, um, really pained by the violence and suffering they see happening around the world today. Other people are educators, leaders, caregivers, entrepreneurs, wondering how to talk and lead in a
Yeah.
time of so much uncertainty and how to serve the people that they are dedicated to serving.
Yeah.
Um, some of you are in the United States and some are not. Some are very politically engaged, some are not. Some are liberal in some ways or conservative in others. We have different beliefs and different fears, and everyone is welcome here.
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal today is to help each other really widen the lens on our worries, whatever they are, and leave here with at least one, or maybe five or six things that we know that we can do with these worries. But because we know that a lot of despair comes from feeling powerless and not
Mhm.
having anything to do. So, to help us get there, we do have a plan for our time together. We're going to spend time asking everyone here just a couple of very short questions in the chat. We will share a story or two, and then we will bring on our very special guest, Professor Kate Sweeny, who studies coping tactics for waiting, uncertainty, and fear. So we'll ask Kate some questions, and then we'll give all of you a chance to ask questions too. And then what we'll do is share some more tactics and then close with a short video clip from a Filipino peace negotiator that I recently had a chance to interview and hear what was helpful to her and the people that she has worked with recently.
Exactly. I am excited, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Thank you
This is
all for
good.
coming here. This is going to be good. Before we go any further, we want to stop talking for a second and hear from you all in the chat, whoever's interested in participating. First, we are wondering what's on your mind. What is one thing you are worried about
hmm
right now, today, in 3 words or less?
hmm
Ready, set, go. Okay.
What are we seeing, Amanda?
We're seeing finding a job,
Yeah.
fascism, democracy, funding to continue our work,
Mm,
climate, human rights, political explosion. It's a good word for it.
mm,
Supporting anxious activists, isolation, democracy, judicial branch becoming irrelevant, internal conflict.
mm,
That's a good one.
mm,
Thank you, Alex. Our country, my safety, civil war, worried about what's happening in California, safety for all, funding, the health of our country, government and democracy, marginalized folks suffering. I don't want to live with hate, yet I am so triggered every day. Okay, intractable and ongoing conflict where a person seems intent only on dominating and not engaging in good faith. Whoops,
Mm.
too many words.
You get a pass.
Thank you, Katie. Global warming, authoritarianism, loss of human rights, recession,
Yeah.
fascism, economy. Woo!
Yeah.
How to be a good
Heavy.
ancestor. Hmm.
Ooh.
Thank you all for sharing those. You know, no big thing. We're good. These are like heavy things that
Yeah,
we are struggling with.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that is why it's so good that we're doing it together.
Yeah.
You know, you feel it feels so lonely to
Hmm.
be afraid. So it's really important to find ways to do this together.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get just a tiny bit woo woo, not too much. Just bear with us. But in one word, what does fear or worry feel like to you? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Don't overthink it. Hopelessness, the opposite
Mm.
of love. Ooh, yuck,
Ooh.
heat, panic, overwhelm, suffocation.
Oh,
Oh, that's a good one.
bad.
Overwhelm, no air. So many of these have to do with breathing.
Really.
Tightness in chest, constricted, nausea, uncertainty, anxiety, tight chest and upset guts. I'm a worrywart.
Yeah.
Tension in body, courage, overwhelm, panic, courage. Interesting.
Mm. Mm.
Heaviness. It's a real physical sensation, isn't it? Like it's definitely a physical sensation. And I'll
Yeah.
be curious to hear what our special guest,
Yeah. How
Dr.
she
Sweeny, is thinking as
weighs in
she's
on that.
reading those.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Mm.
we have a rule here at Good Conflict where we don't ask people to share without also sharing something ourselves, which is only fair. So today, Elena is going to tell us a short story, kick us off with a short story about a time that she was struggling, you were struggling with fear,
Hmm.
and what helped you in this situation. And this will
Yeah.
be uh, really, we hope, a good setup for bringing on our expert, Dr. Sweeney. And who knows, Len, maybe she'll have some advice for us.
I hope
Maybe you did it
so.
all wrong and
I
she can
hope
tell us.
so. This is the selfish part of this, right? Is that we
Right.
get free coaching advice. That would be
Yes.
wonderful. Um, when I was thinking about this question and sharing, like the very first thing that came to mind was this thing that happened, and I really haven't really been able to shake it from my mind. It was about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was working on a series of stories about sexual exploitation. And specifically, I was focusing on this gray area that exists between prostitution and trafficking. And it was incredibly hard, understandably, to find someone in that space who trusted me enough to talk. But eventually I did. I had someone help me, and a courageous young woman opened up her life to me. And I just remember after our interview, I was terrified for her. I was terrified. The woman who connected us, she assured me that she would keep tabs on her, but it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't enough. And the thing that happens with journalists, and I understand this, but we'll get criticized often for having these really transactional relationships with our sources. And that's fair sometimes. But I'll say, like many of us, we really do carry those stories with us. We carry our sources with us. And I know I do, and especially with this one. And so the next morning after the interview, I got out of bed and I just threw up. And I threw up again and again and again. And it was just my body's way of processing that feeling of fear that I had. And I didn't know what to do. And it was just like, after a while, I just remember quickly saying to my husband, I need you to go to Barnes and Noble and I need you to grab Ariana Huffington's book, Thrive, for me. Because I had
Hmm.
heard so much about this book. I'd heard so much. So he picked it up and I read it that same day. And for the first time, I found this way. I had learned how to combine prayer and meditation to help me do something with the fear instead of just sitting with it, but to
Hmm.
move through it. And that was like this moment that I come back to. And I still think about that because I still use that combination even today. Doesn't always help, but it's a way to not feel so stuck all the time with it.
Mm. That's interesting. Combining. So you were already using prayer, but now you started
Yeah,
using meditation. Is that what happened?
meditation. That's it. Because I heard about meditation. I was like, oh please, that's not gonna do a single thing for me.
All right, that's how I was.
But it did. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I was the
What
same
about
way.
you?
I learned to meditate only after being forced to try it by Gary Friedman, who's featured in my book and good friend now.
Yeah.
But then I started doing Headspace 10 minutes a day, and I still do it years later. So,
Yeah.
um, yes, so thank you for sharing that. I don't think we talk about this enough, but when you immerse yourself in the stories of loss and the terrible things people can do to each other, a little bit of that pain can stay
Hmm.
with you for a long time, and you have to learn how to manage that.
Yeah.
It's funny you mention a book because I'm just going to share real quickly that
Yeah.
I also find books to be super helpful at times of fear and uncertainty. And currently, I am reading a book called The Worry Trick. I don't know if anyone has anyone ever read this. I've had it for a while, but I just never read it. And so I picked it up partly for this webinar, but partly because I was
Yeah.
curious. And it does a really good job. It's sort of like a very user friendly, even funny guidebook
Huh.
for understanding why we worry and what to do with our thoughts based
Yeah.
on cognitive behavioral therapy and other evidence-based interventions. So I highly recommend, and we'll put a link in the chat in case
Oh,
you
good.
are interested in checking it out.
All right, I think it's time, right? It's time
Yes, I think so.
that we get to welcome our very special guest, Professor Kate Sweeny. So Kate is a professor of psychology at the University of California, Riverside, and she has spent over 2 decades researching how people cope with stress in uncertain times. So as you might imagine, she is incredibly high demand right now. And so, because of that, we are just so grateful that she's spending time with us today. So, we will ask her a few questions about her research and then take some time to hear some questions from you as well. So, when things come to mind for you, please drop them in the chat and we will get to as many of them as we can.
Kate, good to see you. The last time, well, let me just explain how we met. We met back in the fall when I was writing a column for the Washington Post about how to manage anxiety in the week leading up to the 2024 presidential election. Feels like a long time ago. But at the time, you were super helpful, and you told me how you were trying to do a lot of the things your research had suggested that you should do. You were taking whatever actions you could take, and then working to stay optimistic. And then here's the twist: allowing yourself to be pessimistic at the very last minute to sort of prepare yourself for whatever news might come. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the trick.
Okay. Okay. So now catch us up on how you are coping since the election. A lot has happened, and I'm guessing like there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know, but I'm guessing about in your life, there's uncertainty about what funding for universities like yours will look like for immigrants in your state, across the country, for your students. How are you doing, Kate?
Let's just say that I definitely relate to a lot of the things that folks posted in the chat. And as I was reading those, I was thinking, "Ooh, I don't know that I'm going to be able to solve these problems, but maybe we can talk
That's
about some
okay.
tips for coping." Yeah, I think we talked about a week before the election, and I was open in that piece, so I'll be open here that I was definitely a fan of Kamala Harris. We may all be in various places politically, but for me at least, the election did not go as I hoped, and so. I did, brace myself for the worst, I guess, kind of as the returns were coming in. No, I don't know. It was still a pretty tough blow. But yeah, I think since then, there was sort of a period of maybe disappointment, but then a lot of uncertainty as folks have expressed. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic, in context of my work, because mostly what I've studied in my career has been these kind of acute moments of uncertainty where, like, you're waiting for some kind of news outcome of a presidential election, for example. But mostly I've looked at kind of personal versions of that. So waiting for a biopsy result or a big professional exam result, that kind of thing. And how we sort of feel and how we cope differs a bit when we're dealing with that kind of like temporary, extreme kind of experience of uncertainty and worry versus I think what for many of us we're in now, which is this more kind of slow unfolding, no end in sight feeling of kind of, maybe kind of a permanent uncertainty. And it's something I think many of us probably remember from COVID too, where I also was doing a lot of interviews and was like, this is kind of different from what I normally study. You know, it's not one
Hmm.
moment, it's not one bit of news. It's like this broader picture of just what's going to happen next. So yeah, it's definitely a very uncertain time.
Yeah, no, and it's different. You're right, because that was a very acute phase of worrying, right? Like you knew there
Yeah.
was something was going to happen on a certain date, and that's a
Yeah.
lot of the research you've done, as you mentioned. So interesting, focusing on women who are waiting for breast biopsy results. So let's first talk about there are people in this room who are waiting for news still. So let's first talk about that kind of coping. What, when we talk about what you've learned from that kind of coping, from the women, let's say, waiting for biopsy results, what tends to help them through that waiting?
Right. So one of the things that I learned kind of early in my research on this kind of experience of waiting for some kind of uncertain news is that we humans tend to try lots of different things. It's a very just for many of us in many circumstances a very distressing experience. So distressing, in fact, that people will regularly say to me in my research in public, like I would rather get bad news than keep waiting. It's somehow worse almost to not know than to get that definitive bad news, which I have to say was kind of the motivating question for my research because it's like, how can that be possible? How can we wish to be in a state of knowing the bad thing happened versus possibly still having a good outcome? But I think that, you know, it's the uncertainty. It is that uncertainty that's so difficult. And one of the things that we have concluded, I guess, although we can't really collect data on this, is that we have not, as humans, evolved to cope very well with that kind of uncertainty for good reason, because worry is actually really, really useful as much as it's really, really unpleasant. It kind of draws our attention to something that might be coming in our future, that might be threatening to us in some way, maybe physically, but very often emotionally. And so without worry, we wouldn't prepare, we wouldn't prevent. It's a motivating force that we really need, and we do well to have it. But because that's such a useful like alarm bell that goes off, we're not very good at turning it off. It's something that we really like have kind of built into our system, and so we try to cope in lots of different ways. Probably many of us have experienced like trying lots of stuff and not having it feel like it's doing much to help us. And that's really what my research has shown. It's kind of a complicated problem, this thing that is uncertainty. And so what I've tried to do in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so is to try to build a little bit of a toolbox where maybe the solutions aren't as, solution is a strong word, but the coping techniques aren't as obvious, but maybe they're helpful. And so I'll mention one right now. Actually, I'll mention two. I'll start actually with meditation. Normally, I'm really hesitant to mention meditation because exactly as Helen and Amanda have both said, like I too was really resistant to the concept of meditation. I thought, no, my worry is very useful. I don't really need to manage it or get used to it or find a way to cope with it. I mean, and so I eventually sort of brought to my knees by a very stressful situation and was like, fine, I guess I'll try it, and found it really helpful. And in fact, we found in our research that if you kind of can make yourself do it, that kind of mindfulness practice of trying to stay in the moment, rather than doing a lot of mental time travel, what's going to happen in the future, how did we get here? What have I done in the past? Ruminating, that sort of thing really quiets down, and it can be very helpful for coping. So there is something to that. But everyone hates that advice. So I'm going to move past that and onto something that I think people tend to be a little bit more open to and that I've also found really
Right, the
helpful.
people who like it are the people who already meditate, right? They're like,
Yeah, right.
yes, but
Yes.
everybody
So
else
no,
is like, oh
I
God.
will say for anybody who's like maybe open to try, maybe you're like at your wit's end and you're like, I don't know, I'll try anything. In some of our research studies, we've just had people like we asked them to do it 10 minutes a day. They certainly didn't do that. I think they were at best maybe doing it once a week, and still saw like helpful coping improvements and
Okay.
improvement in mood. So yeah, so it doesn't take like going to a 2 week silent retreat to like get some of these benefits. Just sitting, practicing, focus on your breath or whatever. And there's lots of ways to practice mindfulness that doesn't involve sitting silently. That's another important detail there. But again, it's a
Hmm.
useful tool, I think, if you can introduce
Yeah.
it into your life. But it definitely benefits from practice. And so again, if that's not the kind of thing you want to try to do all the time, I get that. I do have an alternative, and that is this idea of getting into flow. So, flow is a concept that's been around in my field of psychology for, I don't know, the better part of 50 years, probably. And there's a lot of kind of mystery and mystique kind of around flow, but basically, I think of it as just a really excellent, exquisite distraction. So, the flow test I ask people to kind of think about for their own lives is what's that thing that you know you can't start doing if you have to get out of the house in 10 or 15 or 30 minutes because you will just completely lose track of time. That's flow for you. Most people have various activities that will get them into flow. You can also kind of turn any activity into a flow activity. I can say more about that if it's helpful, but that kind of mental test is a good test, and it kind of starts to tell you exactly why it's really helpful in these worrisome moments. Because when you're in flow, your mind kind of shuts down. It's totally focused on the activity. Time flies by, and go figure. That's a pretty nice antidote to the kind of worries and kind of ambient anxieties that we've been talking about.
Oh, I love that one. And I'm wondering if people feel moved to do so, if they could add in the chat what gets them feeling that state of flow. Is it reading a book? Is it painting? Is it knitting? Does it count to watch TV or does that not count, Kate? Please say it counts.
Lots, lots of scientific debate about that. Reading books is another one that people like go really deep on.
Oh,
We nerds like to really think hard about small questions. I will tell you that probably most flow researchers would say TV doesn't usually quite get you there. So it's more of a passive experience. I don't know about others, but I am perfectly capable of carrying on worrying while I'm watching TV because it's just not quite gripping enough. Maybe, you
mm,
know, the best show ever made will get you there. Maybe a show that really draws you into like being kind of absorbed in the mystery, maybe like a thriller or something where you're like kind of trying to solve the mystery might get you there. But for the most part, I sort of recommend maybe if you're having really intense, you know, worries or fear, that's probably not going to be a strong enough pull, essentially, and that maybe trying something a little more active, a little more challenging. Like for me, actually, even though that's the last thing I want to do when I'm worried, sitting down and doing some work, because I fortunately am in a position where I love my work, is way more effective than like zoning out or scrolling TikTok, even though that's kind of what I'm drawn to in those moments. So it is a little
mm.
counterintuitive, I think, in those moments. But if you can find something that's challenging and really captures your mind, that's going to be better. Phone games, by the way, totally count. So I'll give you that one.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So that is very helpful and good to know that a small amount of meditation goes a long way. And by the way, when you're meditating and you keep thinking thoughts, but catching yourself and noticing that and coming back to your breath or whatever, that's meditating. Like, I think there's a
That's
big
it. Yep.
misperception that meditating means your mind goes blank. And that's a sure way to feel like you're failing if that's your definition of, like, I know when I started meditating I was amazed at how tedious so many of my thoughts were. Like, they were like either something that happened in the past or something I need to do in the future, like planning, like grocery shopping, or sometimes I'd catch myself mentally writing an email to someone.
Yes.
What? Like, life is too short for that, but
Yes.
it's useful to notice this is what's happening. And it's like so much of the work we do in conflict too is about getting a little space, just a little bit of space from the conflict, right? And there are folks here I'm seeing who know a ton about conflict in this room. And so, a lot of it is about getting some distance from it. And that is what you're doing with your thoughts, right? Is getting some distance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And kind of yeah, I mean, it's really just kind of shutting it down in some ways. I mean, it's not a permanent solution. I often say, sort of with meditation as a contrast, and there's a lot of similarities between like a really mindful state and something like flow. Mindfulness is good in the sense that, or mindfulness practice, whatever it is good in the sense that, exactly as you said, it's like going to the mental gym. It's not just sitting quietly without thoughts. It's like, you know, constantly kind of noticing and bringing it back and noticing and bringing it back. It's
Mm,
kind of mentally tiring, but it builds up these
hmm
mental habits and these connections in your brain and all the good things that make it then a more natural process. You'll find you're just like walking the dog and suddenly
Yeah.
you're not thinking 20 thoughts all at once. Whereas flow is great in the moment. It's like once you're out of it, you're kind of out of it and all the worries are there to greet you
Uh,
again. But I think, you know, certainly I've experienced that when I'm having those really intense periods of worry or fear, that like just getting a break is worth it. And physiologically, like we talked about those feelings of like not being able to breathe, that's all what we call the sympathetic nervous system. It sounds so nice, right? Sympathetic. It's not, I mean, that's the like fight or flight, super amped up. feeling that we're all sort of
Misnomer.
thinking about. And yep, yep. And those are, it's good that our body does that for lots of good reasons. But if it's doing it too much, it's exhausting. And so just kind of letting that settle a little bit can be really healthy and helpful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And okay, so now we've talked about like anticipating potentially bad news.
Yeah.
Um, and I know this isn't the focus of your work of your research, but what do we know from the research that's out there about actually living with the bad news? Like the thing is
Right.
happening. What helps people
Yep.
cope?
Right. There's no one size fits all solution, which is
Yeah.
good and bad news, right? So it's not, I almost find with waiting or with uncertainty, it's like, it's such a tenacious problem that like you kind of, there's only a few tools that I think really actually work very well universally. When it comes, I mean, the good news is when it comes to coping with like a situation right in front of you, you have lots of options. I think for a lot of people, what's hard about waiting is that we often don't, waiting or uncertainty is we don't have a lot of control. And you kind of can't act. And that's part of what makes it so difficult. Like the alarm is going off and there's nothing you can do to hit the snooze button because you're just stuck. You're just waiting. When you have something that you're facing, you do lose your job or you do in fact get a cancer diagnosis in some of my research. Again, it's a terrible experience. I'm not saying that's like good news by any stretch, but there's usually some sort of opportunity for action. And we humans are a bit more wired, I guess, to kind of maybe a little bit more know what to do in those circumstances. Of course, there's often like the kind of the hit of little t trauma or really big T trauma, depending on the situation. But something, a blow kind of comes to us. We have some kind of bad news, and that immediate aftermath can be really challenging. Some researchers have spent a lot of time studying sense making and benefit finding and found that people who are able, maybe not right away, but kind of eventually to think, well, I kind of understand how this happened. That ameliorates some of the challenge of feeling like I don't understand life anymore. I don't understand myself anymore. You kind of need to put things in the right boxes or shelves in your
Hmm.
mind to be able to move forward. So that can be a really helpful process if you can do it. And benefit finding is really all about, the silver lining, which can often feel a little like Pollyanna toxic positivity, but
Hmm.
it can be very personalized. It doesn't need to mean that you think that this bad thing is a good thing, in fact, but it just kind of gives you some sense of like, well, okay, maybe I can find some good in this, or at least something
Hmm.
that good that has come from it. If you'll permit me one quick deviation back to waiting, one of my favorite findings that we've revealed, I guess, in our research is that process of benefit finding was always really studied like after the bad thing happened. And we wondered if maybe that process actually starts in anticipation. Like, can we line up those silver
Hmm.
linings in advance? And so we did a study with women who were getting a breast biopsy that already had a positive, which of course in medical terms means negative, bad mammogram result. And so, many of them, in fact, did probably have breast cancer. But we asked them at that biopsy appointment, can you think of any good that might come of it? Any silver lining if you find out you need treatment,
Hmm.
which was essentially the equivalent of saying if you have cancer. I'll give everyone a second to just pause and think. It was about 200 women. What percentage of them you think might have said yes to that? I should say we almost didn't include the question in our interview because it
I was
almost
gonna
seemed like,
say,
yeah,
like
like
almost
gross to ask
rude.
about.
Like I might just
Almost
be like,
rude,
F
exactly.
you.
Yeah,
Did
exactly.
anyone
Yeah,
write F
right,
you?
totally. Yeah, they were actually talking to a person, so maybe they didn't feel as
Oh,
much like they
okay.
could say that. But so take that into account in your percentage guess. I will say my mom, who survived cancer twice, was like, 1, 0? I don't know. Like, it's terrible. Why would you think that way? In fact, of those 200 plus women, about 75% said in response to that question, oh, yeah, absolutely. If I have cancer, I
Hmm.
will appreciate life more. I'll appreciate my relationships more. I'll be a role model for my daughters. I can
Hmm.
teach people about the importance of, early detection and prevention. I'll get healthier. They like elaborated all these really beautiful reasons. And we know from some other research in my lab that doing that, kind of setting up those silver linings helps. If the bad news comes, it kind of buffers a
Hmm.
little bit of that blow. So,
Hmm.
I kind of rambled my way
Wow.
into a bunch of different thoughts there,
No,
but there's a
that's a
few
great
a few
example.
tips.
I love
Yeah.
that example because yeah, it does feel like, oh, I'm not, please don't tell me about silver linings right now when the world feels like
Right.
it's ending. But because you were studying people who really were in a, serious objective
Life or death, potentially.
threat
Yep.
situation, so much
Yeah, actually,
of
Amanda, was
our,
it in your article that where I think I talked about trying to find like or think about these silver linings if the alternative candidate won and like
yeah,
all I don't
yeah,
remember if that was yours or another article,
yeah,
but
I think
all the
so.
comments were like absolutely not. It was a
Oh,
lot of FUs in the
funny.
comments. So for some reason
Oh,
with cancer
yeah.
people can do it. With politics it was harder, but
Right. It feels somehow threatening to even
yeah.
allow. that there could be. And, kudos to you for reading the comments.
I only
I
read like the
usually dip
first
in and
five and I
out,
was
but
like,
yeah, yeah,
oh
it's
yeah,
like,
no, I read a few. I think, yeah, I think I had reason to believe they weren't cruel. So I just thought, okay,
yeah,
that's
right.
enough. I won't go back to this.
In general, they're, yeah. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, that's so interesting. And it makes me remember how much of our internal state is determined by storytelling, like the stories we tell ourselves, right? Alen, you talk about this a lot, like the stories we tell ourselves. So we know that feelings, correct me if I'm wrong here, Kate, come from thoughts, more or less, right? Like thoughts influence our feelings.
They
And
influence our
thoughts,
feelings. Yes.
yeah, and thoughts we can't totally control, right? That's a big important finding of cognitive behavioral therapy. You can't control your thoughts. And so your brain is just kind of doing crazy stuff like generating spam email all day long. And so these thoughts, if you don't know how to manage them, can generate more suffering than you already need to have, right? So some of it is about with mindfulness, like noting the thought and moving on, right?
Yep.
Or acting on the thought if you can act on the thought. And if you
Yep.
can't, just noting it, as they say, I think in Buddhism, like welcoming it for tea or something. You're not rejecting it and resisting it and yelling at yourself for even having the thought, what is my problem? Why do I worry so much? That just makes it stronger and stronger. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, I've heard this advice, just anecdotally, at least with worry as well, of kind of when when your mind is spiraling and kind of looping around and just obsessing about some potential future outcome that you're worried about, because of exactly what you said, combined with what I said a moment ago, which is worry can be actually really helpful and it's good that we have it. I sort of practice this a little bit. It's almost like a joke I have with myself where like I'm worrying too much and I'll be like, cool, Kate, thanks. I really appreciate what you're trying to do for me here, but like now's not the time. Like I need to move on. And I
Yes,
think
yes.
sometimes like you said, like kind of being like, thanks, worry. I really do. I see you. I appreciate you, but
Yeah.
I need to like think about some other things right now. It can be more productive than fighting it or like trying to squash it
Right.
down. Yeah.
Right. Right. Like you just, it's amazing. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but
Oh
like,
no, no.
I don't know, I'd say 50%, which is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Sometimes, as exactly you said, if you're not like monk who is meditating hours a day, we very often have our minds kind of run off and like we have no consciousness that that's happening. And so
hmm
sometimes, that stress level, that physiological like stress reaction can just get up and up and up, and we don't even really realize what's causing it. And so sometimes just being like, I am worrying right now. That's cool,
uh-huh.
but I'm gonna try to not, I'm gonna try to think about other things. I'll save that for later. Whatever trick works for you can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I have so many questions, but I want to get to, we've got some good questions coming in the chat. So my last question for you now is just, is there something that comes to mind that people tend to get wrong about worry and uncertainty? Like just through no fault of their own, but like,
Yeah.
at parties, what do people misunderstand about worry and uncertainty?
Sadly, we're all kind of, local experts of our own worries. And so, I hesitate to say that people sort of misunderstand things fundamentally. I think, we know
Yeah.
worry well. The thing that, and I kind of already said this, so I won't say too much more about it, but like, I think the thing that we miss or the thing that we don't get right is like we're trying all these different things to sort of cope with it and none of them are really working, and it's maybe that we're misapplying coping strategies that work great once the news has come but like aren't kind of satisfying or effective when we're in that period of not knowing.
Mm.
And that's why, in my research, actually, I kind of studied what is this thing waiting and worry and, what is going
Mm.
on and who's better at it and worse at it. I did that for lots of years. And then at some point I paused and was like, someone asked me how to make this easier, I would have absolutely no answers for them. I could just tell them all the reasons it's really, really hard. And so that was when I started studying flow and mindfulness and this what we call preemptive benefit finding that I talked about, because I wanted to kind of see like maybe we can give people some tools that are, not the first thing they'd go to. Like it isn't the vegging out in front of the TV that might be sort of intuitively the good thing to do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I do that too, but sometimes it's not enough almost. And so I think sometimes
Mm.
that's it. The instinct to like relax is sometimes not always the best thing to meet those really intense worries. And you really need to engage, not with them, but in something else that kind of gets your mind in a better
Mm.
place. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, and I'm so glad, by the way, that you shifted to working on interventions instead of. So just thank you from all of humanity. A question from Katie: would you say the problem with worry is mostly mental time travel, or is there more that's problematic to it?
It is definitely one of the problems. Similar to, so rumination and worry, those are probably in like normal human life interchangeable words. In science, we get very picky. And so when we say rumination, we mean sort of past thinking, like, oh my God, why did I say that? Excuse
Okay.
me. Or whatever, just kind of thinking over and over about things that in the past, typically
Already
negative things that
happened.
have happened. Right. Worry is kind of the future focused equivalent where we're kind of looping those thoughts. So, that is a form of mental time travel that is it, it's not useless, right? Like thinking about the future helps us prepare for the future, helps us see things that might be coming and do something different to prevent them. So it's not to say that, as I've said, worry is very useful, but that mental time travel can really be exhausting. And it's really what mindfulness is kind of meant to counteract. The looping, though, that I just talked about is another piece of it. So, in addition to the fact that you're not in the present, you're also often just like thinking the same thing kind of over and over again and like never finding the off ramp from that, traffic circle in your mind. And so that can also be, I think, really challenging and can turn something that might be that you might have been able to handle as like an acute stressor where you're just like, okay, let me handle this, let me think about it, sort it out, move on, turns it into a chronic stressor. And chronic stress, as I'm sure lots of folks here know, is something that's kind of your body turning on you a little bit. It's using this really good thing we have, which is the stress response, and making it kind of turning the switch on and like taping it on so it never really goes off all the way. And that's bad for sleep. It's bad for your health. It's bad for lots of
Hmm.
things. And so, if you can kind of find ways to exit that loop, and again, flow gives you short breaks, mindfulness might give you longer breaks. I've also studied lots of ways we can just kind of change the way we're thinking, which is like often easier said than done. But that preemptive benefit finding is one. Think, well,
Hmm.
okay, if the worst happens, so what? So is there anything good I can find from that? Also, just kind of thinking if there's anything you can do to prepare, rather, so sort
Hmm.
of using that motivational feeling of worry to like lay out some, get your ducks in a row basically before the thing you fear is happening.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in any case, to answer Katie's question, that looping is one of the problems, in addition to the fact that it's future focused, and finding those like mental off ramps can be really helpful if you can do it.
Yeah, so it
Easier
keeps you
said
in
than
this
done, I realize.
chronic state of alert. And that's the problem with 24
Right.
hour news too, right? Like that's not how
Yes.
we're really wired to function. So okay, you answered the question about how unfortunately TV or reading might not count as flow. But we can debate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question, what about sleeping? Does sleeping count?
Yeah, it's a question close to my heart in the sense that when we do studies about flow, which I have done a lot of at this point, we ask people sometimes like, well, what was your flow activity today that you're reporting on? And sleeping is like the one where we're always like, well, we didn't explain flow well enough, sorry. Which is not to
Uh,
critique the person who's asking this question, because it's a totally reasonable question, and lots of people think that is kind of it checks the boxes, right? Like your mind is shut down, you're not worrying, so like why would that
yeah,
not be flow? What I would say is, sleeping's great. I love sleeping. Sometimes a good
yeah.
nap is incredibly refreshing and restoring. Having said that, if what you're going for is the particular thing that is flow, that probably wouldn't count. It wouldn't have the same benefits. It wouldn't kind of pull the same levers in your brain, but doesn't
Mm,
mean it's, you want a lot of different tools in that toolbox. And so, sleep,
yeah.
reading, TV, all perfectly reasonable tools. Flow is just a different one.
Right. So anything that increases your sort of body budget, right? Like your sleep, your
Right. Yeah.
eating fuel that's good for you, food, socializing
Exercise,
with
all of that.
others. Yeah,
Socializing. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
exercise. It's for me critical. Like it's like
Yeah.
I can't skip it.
Kate, thank you. This was so fascinating, and my hand hurts because I was taking so many different notes, and I would love to spend more time with you on how to turn everyday things into these state of flows. Because the state of flow, I just love everything that you said. Um, so what we want to do though, and Amanda, if you can share in the chat, we really want to just build on this foundation that Kate has created for all of us. And we know that there is just a lot of wisdom in this room right now. And as Kate mentioned, and Amanda too, we are experts when it comes to worry and uncertainty and fear. And there are likely tactics that we have all tried and that have helped us to manage and to get into that state of flow that Kate was describing for us. But yeah, we'd love to hear from all of you and to see like what are you finding during these days of stress and intensity. And my word is messy. I feel like I start a lot of calls with, how are you doing on this messy day? And I do mean that with care. But we're all finding different ways to navigate this, and we'd love to hear from your wisdom. What is working for you? So if you will, just drop these ideas in the chat and we'll spend some time exploring.
Okay,
Breathing
so we've
consciously. This is good. Oh, this idea of letter writing. Okay, so Katie, letter writing
hmm,
to yourself,
hmm,
others, journaling, writing poetry, writing to future selves, offloading thoughts, any kind of writing. Oh, that's good. Morning meditations, spinning, yarn, knitting, walking.
mm,
We're seeing getting outside without my phone. Hallelujah.
mm.
Going for a
It's a
walk.
good one.
Yes. Meditation
Meditations,
again.
yeah.
Spending time with my children, with the children in my life, walking the dogs, yoga while the coffee brews. Carrie, I just had this visual of that, and I can
That
actually
is nice.
smell the coffee. I love
Yeah, and
that.
you can hear it like kind of percolating.
Yes,
Oh, that's good stuff.
yes.
Oh,
Mm.
Denise just read the book Possibilist, I think it is, by
Oh,
William Ury, who has a lot of credibility in conflict and believes in the possibility of moving through this time. Yeah, absolutely recommend it.
yes, yes.
I did interview him about that book, and we use a lot of his techniques in our workshops. And he's,
We do.
worked as a negotiator in Afghanistan, Colombia, all over the world, in some really difficult conflicts. So
Mm.
it helps to hear what he has learned.
I like this one.
These are great.
Amanda Allison Frost said prioritizing my morning routine of walking. So 15 minutes with the dog usually, and mediation or meditation book, spirit card pulls about 2 minutes, and then
Hmm.
also started a grief group with a friend. I have a
Hmm.
friend yes, that recently did the same thing and is
Hmm.
finding a lot of calm and clarity
Grief
in that.
about things that are happening in the world or about grieving someone who has passed?
Grief in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, grief in the world and what's happening in
Hmm.
our country.
Wow. What an interesting idea. So it gives you space to grieve.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's actually called Holding Space. It's just a group that
Oh.
we're just holding space with each other. And part of it's we write for 20 minutes and then we share out. It's just basically, yeah.
I mean, I feel like, Kate, tell me if I'm wrong, but that there's a lot of evidence that writing is an incredible, right, intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great for kind of taking the heat or the like intensity out of emotional experiences that we've had.
Hmm.
As just a quick twist, because it's one of my favorite little findings. That means you don't want to write a bunch about positive things that have happened to you, because it also takes the like positivity out of that. But for negative stuff, it's
Oh,
great because it will kind of de-emotionalize it.
Huh. That's so interesting.
interesting.
I didn't know that. Okay. Thank you all. This is again an
Mm.
incredible list, and we will, as I said, be sharing it back out with you anonymously.
So let's introduce Miriam, Amanda, because I think what so much of what everyone has shared today, it really echoes something that she shared during a recent interview. So Miriam is a peace negotiator. I will tell you, she is a force. So we have a link that we're going to drop in the chat for you if you'd like to learn more about her and her work. I interviewed her this spring, and I asked her this question. When people are just immersed in conflict and in fear and just it's just debilitating and they feel it. How have you actually seen, how have you witnessed them finding this will to keep going and to not give up on themselves or each other? And her answer was really interesting, and we're going to share it with you. And I just want to provide a little bit of context before we play the clip, because she's talking about this group of women from Southeast Asia who have experienced conflict in very different ways. And she brought them together with a group of other mediators. And the goal was to create this space. And it wasn't just to idea share and discuss strategy, but as Miriam says, it was really about getting fresh air.
Hmm.
So I just want to set it up with that and we'll take a look.
Okay.
Always have the wheel right there and then. And the idea there was just to have some fresh air. And we had a psychologist with us, a trauma specialist, feminist psychologist, in fact, who specializes in trauma. The emotions they were overflowing with pain, with a lot of pain, personal pain, political pain, community pain. And so it was very necessary. They did feel rested and they did feel they got some fresh air. But it was also a learning moment, learning from other women who came over and told them their stories. Women who may be in a better position now as far as their country's politics are concerned, but who actually had to undergo very difficult decades. They got the inspiration there. It's not about frustrating them, but for them to see that this happened decades ago, but now they're in a better place. So maybe we are in this really deep shit right now. But maybe if we keep on trying, if we get ideas, it's not just about emotion, but the emotion part are very important, but it's also about concrete ideas. One of the strategies that was shared to them, they have now adapted and are using it in their own context.
What Miriam did is really what all of you did here today, right? So you showed up, you listened, you shared, you brought openness, you let the emotions out. We learned from Kate. We discovered new tactics and ideas, and also lessons from your own experience. And we're going to need more moments like this, these moments of fresh air, even more in the days ahead. So, based on what we heard from Kate and also from all of you, we know that it really is possible.
Well, as I said, we're going to capture everything that people have shared here and share them back out to you. And we're very grateful for all of that. And for hearing from Miriam, like, I just want to point out one of the things that helps me a lot is talking to people and reading about people in other conflict zones in other parts of the world throughout history. Because a big part of this is like widening our lens on the conflict. And so part of what we want to do today is also share some alternative news sources. And you all
Yeah.
probably have ideas, which we'd love to hear as well. But these are ones that really help to balance out our traditional news diet, and help us widen the lens on the world, because there is more that is happening
Mhm.
than we see in our news feeds. The Christian Science Monitor has been doing rigorous reporting on complicated problems since 1908, but they do it with a real sense of care for the reader, which is very different. They're affiliated with a religion, obviously, but the news coverage is not religious.
Mhm.
Reasons to be Cheerful is a nonprofit news outlet that focuses on solutions to problems, not just problems, sort of like our friend Dr. Sweeny. Their motto is, I love this, part magazine, part therapy session, part blueprint for a better world.
I just want to add quickly about the Greater Good Science Center
Yeah.
because they have this, because I think this was new for you too, the happiness calendar that they have.
Yes, I didn't know
And
about
it,
this.
so you can actually download it so it shows up in your own calendar, and every
Hmm.
single day it links to a research article about a different
Hmm.
topic. And as you'll see on the 17th, confront your fears, if you can see that, June 17th. So there's an article about that. So just if you
Hmm.
haven't signed up for this, I have found this to be a real
Oh,
delight to
that's
read in the
cool.
morning.
I didn't know about that. Yeah. And the other one is the Progress Network newsletter, a free weekly newsletter that offers original, in-depth analysis of seriously important underreported stories
Yeah.
of progress from around the world. So I
Yeah.
always make sure to read that. And by the
And
way, sometimes I have to force myself to read these because your brain wants to go to the negative because your brain is searching for threats. So you have to like actually be like, no, wait, I'm also going to read this. And I think that's just like I
yeah.
don't, there's a lot of things my brain wants to do that I have to notice and resist. And so this is one of them.
Yeah, and also we'll say that those news outlets, they're not all fluff news, and we love stories about puppies and babies, and they're definitely necessary, but these are really stories that just talking about your brain and just kind of switching things and taking you into a different place. And it's just highly recommend those and suggest signing up for their newsletters.
Yeah.
And then lastly, just a few other parting gifts for you. This summer, we're holding a very special masterclass, and this one is for educators. And it's all about how to deal with conflict in the classroom, board meetings, on campus, you name it, and how to deal with conflict with more creativity and also with more hope. So we
Mhm.
do have a link that we'll put in the chat
Yeah, I'll do
if you
that.
have some friends who work in education, because we know that education has a lot of conflict these days. Also, we do these free webinars just like this, and we pick different topics every quarter. So the next one that we're doing, I think it's September 11th, Amanda, and that one is
Hmm.
focused on how to deal with conflict entrepreneurs. And if you read High Conflict, you probably recognize that term. And conflict entrepreneurs are people or platforms that exploit and inflame conflict for their own benefit. We know
Hmm.
sometimes that happens in the world of journalism, it happens in politics, it happens everywhere. And we've been hearing from a lot of people asking the question, how in the world are we supposed to deal with that? So we are going to bring some people together on September 11th and drill down. That should be fun. And if you want to get notified about how to sign up for that webinar and other free offerings that we will also put a link for our newsletter in the chat, along with some of our social media channels. And we share every day different tips and tricks for living during these very interesting times.
And some people have asked if we will be sharing the recording. Yes, we will. We will send that out to you soon. And we do hope you will let us know how this went for you. A big part of our job is to listen to you and try to be helpful in
Yeah,
real time. So please let us know. And thank you so much for facing hard problems head on with us
yeah.
today. And special thanks again to Dr. Kate
Oh,
Sweeny.
thank you, Kate. Thank you.
And take good care. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.